ADHD. To understand ADHD, we have to understand how normal self-control develops, and then we'll show where ADHD affects it. There are three concepts that we need to build this model. One, inhibition. You have to stop and build a pause in your behavior. As your mother said, stop and think before you act, and the stopping comes first. Or as Rabelais said, everything comes to those who can wait. But whoever said it, the fact is that what distinguishes human cognition from all other species is we wait. We can decouple an event, a stimulus, from our response to that event. Other species cannot do that. And by decoupling them, we can do things in the delay that others cannot do. But the first thing we have to do is stop. Now, inhibition can be defined as three separate capacities, all of which are impaired in patients with ADHD. The first is the ability to inhibit the urge to respond on the moment to the event. This is the impulsiveness, the disinhibition. The second, however, is the ability to interrupt an ongoing behavior when it's time to do something else. That's the perseveration, and that is also an inhibitory failure. You can't stop what you were doing, particularly if it was interesting, if it was rewarding, to shift to something more important, but where the consequences might be delayed. Finally, there is the ability to protect your frontal lobes, your working memory, your what and when systems from distraction, from interference, from being perverted, disrupted, and distorted by events around you that have nothing to do with the goal you're pursuing. You must be able to suppress those unwanted reactions. Notice that the distractibility in ADHD is not a perceptual issue. It is an inhibition problem. People with ADHD don't perceive distractors any more than others. The difference is they respond to them. They get up and they react to the irrelevant event, and now they're off task. And once they're off task, they can't retain the goal, so now they won't return to the task. So it's simply a series of responding to irrelevant events in life, which is why it is so hard to accomplish your goals. All three of these are failures of the inhibition system. And people with ADHD, as we well know, have trouble with all three. Now, the next concept we need to build up our model is not just inhibition, but self-regulation. What is it? Self-regulation is very simply defined, as it was 40 years ago by Skinner and others, as involving three steps. The fourth step we've already talked about. You've got to stop. But having stopped, you will now direct a behavior back at yourself. You will engage in some action that is aimed at you, not at the world, not at others, back at yourself. You're doing something. What are you doing? You're trying to change your behavior from what it would have been had you simply responded on impulse. So there's a form of self-change going on here. I'm acting on myself to change my next response. Well, why would I want to do that? To change a distant consequence. I am trying to alter the future. I am not trying to change the now. In fact, I may use this as an opportunity to turn away from the seductions of the moment, from the immediate rewards, the feel-good aspect of life. I may turn away from that and subject myself to adversity and poverty for years to change that future. It's called going to college. And then finally, you will internalize your play, and it becomes the source of planning, creativity, innovation, and problem solving. By the way, that's goal-directed creativity, not just artistic or musical. There's a goal to be attained. You've encountered an obstacle. Can you solve the obstacle? Can you invent multiple possible ways around the obstacle to accomplish that goal? And that's based on human play. By 30 years of age, you have this entire system functioning, unless you have ADHD. And then you have a 30 to 40% lag in this entire sequence. The 5 executive abilities I've just described are going to shift your behavior. This is the system that lets you look back, to look ahead, to get ready. Hindsight, foresight, and anticipation of future events. ADHD children are not going to be doing that very well. And if you look back to look ahead, you get a sense of time. And now you know why ADHD destroys the sense of time. Adult ADHD is the consummate disorder of time management. And that's because people with ADHD cannot use their sense of time. It's part of the frontal lobe deficit. People with ADHD will find language to be very weak at influencing their behavior until adulthood. They will be delayed in the ability to use words, language, and instructions as a form of guidance, which is why they don't do what you tell them to do. It's not willful disobedience. It's a failure of language to control the motor system. But we should also see that they have trouble stringing behavior together in a proper sequence. And we will see this no better than in their speech. Ask a high school student with ADHD to stand up and tell you what they read in history last night, and you will get massive disfluency. This is what it will look like. Right? History. I think I read that. Yeah, I did. I know I did. Okay. It's in Boston. I'm sure of that. And there's a guy with a horse. Yeah, there's a horse in there. Something about a church and some lanterns. Give me a moment. God, I love horseback riding. You guys like horses? We go to Charlottesville, Virginia every summer. Man, is that a cool place. Because we have a horse farm down there. And you know, when you're there, if you go there, there's a fantastic barbecue place right at the corner of the downtown. And what did you ask me? Yeah, you're laughing because what you have just seen are two executive failures. I couldn't hold the goal in mind. That's working memory. And I could not assemble the behavior to attain it. And that's this module. So what do you get? You get the correct statements. They're concrete, superficial, out of sequence. And finally, the goal is lost and the conversation has wandered. So you will see a lot of circumlocution and verbal wandering in ADHD adults because they lose the goal they were talking about. And then they can't sequence the information very well either. By the way, you'll see this in writing, you'll see this in speech, and you'll see this in behavior. What does this mean for ADHD? ADHD is not an attention disorder, it's a blindness to the future. It is a myopia to the impending future events. You are nearsighted in time, which means that the child and adult with ADHD are going to wait until the future is imminent. And then they will try to deal with it. But as long as the future stays out there, I don't have to deal with that. The closer it gets, the more I'm going to organize toward it. But I can't really do much about it until it's the 11th hour. And then I will race around, try to slap things together in a hapdash manner to get it done. ADHD creates a nearsightedness to time so that the person with the disorder cannot organize to the delayed future, but only to the imminent future. And so everything in life becomes a crisis. But the crisis was avoidable, and no one has any patience with this because they see this as a moral failing. You could have chosen to get ready, but you didn't. It is phrased as a form of laziness, this layabout, ne'er-do-well, carefree, careless attitude that you could change if you wanted to, right? But we know it as the executive failure it really is. This disorder precludes you from organizing across time. One of the things we have known in neuropsychology is that if you wish to treat an executive disorder, a performance disorder, the only way to treat it is to change the point of performance. The point of performance is the place out there in life where you should be using this knowledge, and for some reason you can't seem to do it. So all treatment must be at the point of performance, and if it's not, it won't work. No amount of treatment done away from that place will solve that problem. Only changing that place will solve that problem. You have to restructure the environment to help them show what they know. Individuals with ADHD need more, not less, accountability. So we're going to need to modify points of performance and create little prosthetic devices, and behavior modification becomes one means of doing so. So you now know why we have to do behavior modification, because it creates artificial environments that weren't previously there in order to compensate for these executive deficits. But because we have to change the natural environment, the success of any treatment is contingent on the compassion of other people in that environment. How willing are they to help you modify the point of performance? And if they're not on board, and if they're not willing or compassionate, it's going to be very difficult. Not impossible, but quite difficult. So we come to view ADHD, therefore, like diabetes, a long-term chronic disorder that can be successfully managed, but it requires modifying environments, lifestyles, behaviors of the individual. So a chronic disability view of ADHD is a much better view than the attention deficit view of ADHD. So to summarize, we can think of ADHD as a disorder of inhibition that disrupts the executive system and leads to failures in self-regulation. And since the purpose of the executive system is to organize over time and get ready for the futures in life, that is what ADHD is robbing the individual of a capacity to do: organize across time to the future.